so much for coming to this TLSS. We've had quite a few now. I usually start with a land acknowledgement, but I know there will be a much better one coming with the speaker, so I'll skip that. Today we're privileged to welcome Duffy Roberts to present the talk title Storied, Teaching and Learning, Embodied Experiences, Not Things, whose intriguing introduction is as follows. As Thomas King writes, if we want a new reality, tell a different story. What if we told a different story about the place of the classroom? What if we treated the classroom as a place where bodies have place-specific experiences crafted for them? What if, as Dave Stuart writes, our students experience school not as something done to them, but as a work of love crafted for them? What if we thought as if the material and our students' experience of the material was a love letter to embodied learning? What if, as Mandy Len Catron argues, we imagine teaching as an opportunity to learn new skills, try on ideas, and maybe on a good day, find reprieve from the millions of other responsibilities and obligations of human life? Duffy's talk will argue for the value of storied teaching and learning, tell some stories about his 2-decade career teaching writing, and amplify the voices of the people and stories who have influenced his profession. Duffy is a lecturer, joint forestry and land food systems appointment, holding a master's degree in English literature from UBC. As Thomas King writes, the truth about stories is that that's all we are. And Duffy's long career in education has been obsessed with stories. After a 1-year run working at Colorado State University in Fort Collins and a semester at Camosun College in Victoria, he has been at UBC for 19 years, 15 in the English department and 4 in forestry and LFS. He's been in charge of a total of 150 sections of 13 different courses, including our very own NRES 150 scholarly writing and augmentation. A career teaching literature and writing classes with a focus on our place-specific identities has also made him obsessed with the place in the classroom and his positionality in it, which is to say, obsessed with storied, experiential learning and teaching. Thanks so much to the Dean's Office and all the colleagues who make this event possible, and to the fantastic audience for the presence, time, and engagement. Later, we will have a Q&A. So a round of applause for everyone. Thank you. Just a quick note before we proceed that we're recording this. It's not with live audience via Zoom, but we're recording it on our YouTube page. If you may appear in the camera later, if you don't want to be there, just let me know. The easy way, not through a lawyer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andreas. So I've scripted this. And here we go. Thank you all for being here, for placing your bodies in this room. Today is about bodies and how bodies take in the places they inhabit. So you all have some rosemary, a piece of paper, and delicious Welch's gummies that double as a squishy stress ball. Another branch of my talk is story. And amplifying, embodying even the stories and voices that have contributed to my positionality in the classroom. So I begin with Elder Larry Grant's welcome message in a land acknowledgement.
Siem, Nashia, Ayaslak, Wanasqui, Tini Tuner Masquim. Clark, the Showenist. Plano I Holtimoto, because he looks to Hinas, Emignaten, because to the Sans Tomo could from us. The act when it's Joannes, Plano, set to something need to swallow. He looks taller. I tap Gassiam. I want to say thank you and welcome to everyone that's here today at UBC on the traditional, ancestral, unceded lands of the Hunt-Caminum speaking Musqueam people. And as our ancestor Cleoplano did in the past, in welcoming the Spanish under Captain Narvaez and the English under Captain George Vancouver, I raise my hand in welcome to all of you here at UBC on the traditional, ancestral, unceded lands of the Hunt-Caminum speaking Musqueam people. our people have been the ones that have lived on this delta since the last ice age, approximately 10,000 years ago, always living at the mouth of the river. And as the delta was formed, we moved down, and we have lived continuously in our community of Musqueam for 4,000 years or more. So those are a little bit of history for where we are here today at UBC on the traditional unceded lands of the Huntkamino speaking Musqueam people. Hi, Tepka, Siam, Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Larry Grant. My land acknowledgement moves on to amplify some amazing Indigenous authors. Authors like Philip Kevin Paul, Carly Baker, and Samantha Knopf. Because I have so much gratitude for what they have taught me about place. I teach writing in LFS and forestry, but for the first 15 years of my career, I taught as a sessional lecturer in the Department of English, where later on in my time there, I taught Vancouver literature. In my Vancouver literature courses, I asked my students to entertain how their identities were conditioned by place and how places moved their bodies. When my students wrote, I asked them to write about places they could put their bodies in. Because the site of my teaching is the classroom, where bodies of my students show up. And because my teaching career is basically an obsession with stories and how they're shaped, I've come to realize that teaching is about how our students internalize the stories we tell them in the classroom. I've always felt at home in stories, teaching stories, student stories, books that contain stories. And as Robert McFarland suggests, books, like landscapes, leave their marks on us. Robert McFarland also provides a lovely etymology for the verb to consider. Considering the verb to consider, he writes, reminds us that it comes from the Latin considerare, and thus carries a meaning of to study or see with the stars. So today I will consider the potential of classrooms, consider their landscapes and the marks they leave, see classrooms with the stars, and consider the idea of embodied teaching and learning. Carolyn Roberts, in her book, Restoring Education, Decolonizing Your Practice Using a Critical Lens, argues for the value of holistic education and writes, holistic as a whole. When I see the word holistic, I see a hole in the ground. The language we use to tell stories matters. There's lots of subtle scholarship on holistic teaching and learning, but I want to reword it as embodied teaching and learning. And now those of you who have been at UBC for a while might remember UBC's old branding, a place of mind. My body viscerally reacted to that branding. I'm so glad it's not here anymore. I mean, a place of mind doesn't ask us to think about students as embodied beings. Like we literally have their bodies in our classroom. The questions that drive my teaching are, how do I want my students to be changed by my class? And what story do I want them to tell after they complete my class? So this is similar to a question that I asked my students to write about early on in the semester. And namely, I asked them, how do you want to be changed by UBC? Or what story do you want to tell about your time at UBC after you graduate? The answer, variously. Become more independent, become a change maker, that I got career-specific skills, grew as a person, that I became more outgoing, that I cried less as I went along, that I made friends, and that I had fun, and every single one is valid. And very few of them write about the things that I learn. Like Carolyn Roberts, I also want to restore education. And as Thomas King writes, the truth about stories is that that's all we are. Our experiences have value, but our experiences and their storytelling give us agency. King goes on to argue that to every action there is a story, and if we want a different reality, tell a different story. So, consider my confession. I wasn't that good of a teacher when I first started 20 years ago. Maybe none of us are when we first begin. I liken my beginning adapting to this place, adapting to the classroom, to Tim Lilburn adapting to the Moosewood Sandhills in Saskatchewan. In his essay, Going Home, he writes, "We need to find our own way to take this place into our mouth. We must re-say our past in such a way that it will gather us here." Maybe part of my teaching was rethinking my own experiences in the classroom as a student, as a TA, so that I gathered a more effective version of my teaching self here. Maybe part of teaching in an embodied way is learning the potential of my classroom and my students' bodies in it. So, bodies. The language that professors produce in the classroom goes into student bodies. Language is about the body. Language, when it's star-like, should make us feel something. So let me give you some examples here. And some of them make me a little bit vulnerable, but anyway, here we go. Okay, so straight out of high school, I failed out of the University of Guelph in 1992. I didn't go back to school for 6 years. And my favorite part of failing out of that failing out story was the letter that Guelph sent me to tell me that I had failed out. So one of the lines in that sentence, in that letter went, "We invite you." And I was like, invitations are good. You know, happy things, parties, weddings. And then the sentence finished, "not to return." And my heart sunk and I got gut punched by that language. And in hindsight, I think that was the amazingly crafted sentence that inspired me to have a career in language. Another example is the language of parents. Duffy, I'm not mad at you. I'm disappointed in you. I mean, we all know that language, and that's another gut punch language, right? So also, like when my 17-year-old daughter Lucy is chatting with me and my body is at peace in her stories and I know what love is. Or how about UBC grades is a language that moves our students to pride and joy or tears and anger. Or even the language of the classroom. And I have this one experience. I had a literature professor, Glenn Isaac, at Langara College, and one day he asked us to close the door, and all of us thought we were in big trouble. And then he read Gerald Manley Hopkins' sonnet, God's Grandeur, out loud, like really loud, like he would be like, "The world is charged with the grandeur of God, and it will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to greatness like the ooze of oil crushed, and why do men then not wreck his rod?" Like he did this all right. And our bodies literally shook from the energy of the words. Because, as he said, that's how it's meant to be read. Celtic poet Jess Housty argues for the inseparability of places and us. So I want to read this poem out loud. It's called "You Are Inseparable." Carry it with you, the dirt of your motherland, unapologetic beneath your nails, the splinters and thorns that work medicine under your skin. This is the land striving to give you a sovereign ground within your body. You are a whole territory containing king tides and contour lines and scars that curl like moss, like rivers. Your body is a government. Carry it with you. There are flocks of songbirds sleeping in your hair, deer's wisdom compacted in your heels, salmon in the creeks of your veins. Your body and the land have collaborated for your safety and joy and for your weightless autonomy. And it is your sacred responsibility to thrive within the mutual laws that are written. I love how this poem makes me feel and what it makes me think. And while the poem includes details from a specific place, Bella Bella, BC, When I read it to my students, I tell them that this place, UBC, should be the unapologetic dirt under their nails. Get dirty here. Embody this place. I say to them, if you think about this place as a place where you will collect stories, and in the future, use those stories to leverage a career, pay attention to your experiences here. I want teachers to think about how inseparable their classrooms are from their student bodies in them. Our classrooms are the dirt our students get under their fingernails. So the truth about Stories is that that's all we are. I've been local to UBC for about 42 years. Both of my degrees are from UBC, and my mom managed the greenhouses at UBC for 20 years. Hey, Mom. I would visit and graze vegetables from Totem Field for lunch. I would get paid to water on the weekends. I've also been here long enough for the roots of the European beech tree outside of Buchanan Tower to completely swallow the plaque commemorating the World War I Battle of Forestry so that it's not visible anymore. I've been here long enough to require place-specific rituals that center me, like every morning outside the Engineering Student Union building, pulling the sticky green scent of rosemary onto my fingers and inhaling deeply. My body has spent a lot of time at UBC gathering stories. You see, experiences are place-specific, and Kim Spitz-Stafford provides a really lovely way to think about the place of the classroom. A place is a story happening many times. David Abram goes on to write this: to live in a storied world is to know that each land, each valley, each wild community of plants and animals and soils has its particular style of intelligence. Each ecology has its own psyche, and the local people who buy into their imaginations to the psyche of the place by letting the land dream its tales through them. So, what dreams and imaginings of the land of our classroom go through our bodies of our students? What are our classroom's particular style of ecological intelligence? Let's consider what metaphors do just for 1 second. So the definition is, the essence of a metaphor is understanding and experiencing one thing in terms of the other. So if you get the example swimming in money, right? You map the idea of swimming, you can drown in it, there's a lot of volume of water, it can touch your skin, all this kind of stuff like that photo up there. Or if you grew up in my generation, I was always remember Scrooge McDuck swimming in his coins in his vault, right? So swimming in money, right? Understanding one kind of thing in terms of another. So I also have to confess this. It took me a while to love swimming in the classroom. Now, speaking of love, I shared an office with Mandy Len Catron in the English department for 12 years, and I learned a lot about teaching from her. Now, Mandy Len Catron writes about metaphors the metaphors we use to understand love, and I think it's actually worth a little bit of a listen. But she's amazing. But let's just listen.
Okay, so today I want to talk about how we talk about love. And specifically, I want to talk about what's wrong with how we talk about love. So most of us will probably fall in love a few times over the course of our lives. And in the English language, this metaphor, falling is really the main way that we talk about that experience. And I don't know about you, but when I conceptualize this metaphor, what I picture is straight out of a cartoon. Like there's a man, he's walking down the sidewalk. Without realizing it, he crosses over an open manhole and he just plummets into the sewer below. And I picture it this way because falling is not jumping. Falling is accidental, it's uncontrollable, it's something that happens to us without our consent. And this is the main way we talk about starting a new relationship. So I am a writer and I'm also an English teacher, which means I think about words for a living. And you could say that I get paid to argue that the language we use matters. And I would like to argue that many of the metaphors we use to talk about love, maybe even most of them, are a problem. So in love, we fall. We're struck. We are crushed. We swoon. We burn with passion. Love makes us crazy, and it makes us sick. Our hearts ache, and then they break. So our metaphors equate the experience of loving someone to extreme violence or illness.
Sorry, I'm going to fast forward a little bit here because there's a little bit of an end bit that I want to use to inspire the rest of this. We're going to go to, oops, sorry, no, sorry, Mandy. There we go. Okay, here we go.
I'm not actually the first person to suggest this. So in their book, The Metaphors We Live By, linguists Mark Johnson and George Lakoff suggest a really interesting solution to this dilemma, which is to change our metaphors. So they argue that metaphors really do shape the way we experience the world, and that they can even act as a guide for future actions, like self-fulfilling prophecies. So Johnson and Lakoff suggest a new metaphor for love. Love is a collaborative work of art. And I really like this way of thinking about love.
So do I, by the way. So love is a collaborative work of art. I like this metaphor's reorientation to love. And I want students to love showing up to my classes. So let's re-story students. Let's write metaphors about students. So all of you on your tables, you have a piece of paper. And you have the beginning of a metaphor. My students are. So basically, I just want you to complete that metaphor. Have fun with it. Don't worry about it. And I'll give you some guiding examples. So how about my students are a collaborative work of art? Or my students are meant to see with the stars? Or how about my students are hungry goslings? Or how about my students are becoming? So you go ahead, write a metaphor. I'll give you a little bit of time. It's not a test, by the way. Everything's okay. It's okay. It's just fun. I know I'm making you all think in non-scientific ways, but it'll be okay. Okay, so do we have something down? Ish? Okay, so now all I want you to do is follow the instructions. Crumple the paper up into the shape of a snowball.
Snowball.
Which is appropriate for our current weather. Okay, next bit of instruction. Good luck. When I ask my students to do this, I just say throw them at me. Right? I always feel like they get a little bit of rage out. Come on, throw it. And you guys are like, what? Throw? Yes, you can. Okay, there you go. All right. Move your bodies and retrieve one of them. Doesn't have to be your own. I don't know how you would know it was your own.
Well.
And then uncrumple it, and you can read it.
Hey, I got my own.
Oh, no, really? What else can you? Mix it up. One right here, Billy. Behind that red. Oh, it might be. Just share it with somebody else. Hey.
You don't want to trade.
So let's hear a few, I'd say a few, 2 or more. Anyone?
Becoming a force of change.
My students are becoming the force of change.
Learning ninjas.
Learning ninjas. Anyone else?
Knowing what they want to be.
Exploring what they want to be. Yes?
Test audience.
Sorry? My test audience. Oh, yeah. A beta test. Yeah, there we go. Yes. Anybody else?
Ingredient found in a bakery.
Ingredients found in a bakery. Man, that takes me back. I used to bake cakes for a living. Anyway, yes.
A long one.
Go ahead.
My students are like a field of tall flowers over which the wind passes,
Flattening them. No, you do it.
flattening them briefly before the spring erect once more.
Whoa.
That's what we call in the profession an extended metaphor. Okay. Thank you for doing that. Another student metaphor that I'm creating here. My students are embodied dendrology. Let me read you Terence Young's poem, Dendritic. On the backs of my hands, veins fan out, tributaries each of the great river of blood that flows through legs, arms, fingers, the forks of this body, this trunk. So no wonder I see myself in the leaves that rot to skeletons each autumn, in deltas and estuaries, where streams like roots diverge, and in the arboreal heights of fir and spruce, aloft on limbs that hold me up to the light, as we might hold a negative, an X-ray, to reveal that I am a creature like every other in this world, that splits and splits and splits again. I love how place-specific this poem implies our bodies become. I love how it argues for dendritic knowing, branching and branching and branching again, which is kind of how I think students should pursue their degree. If I imagine students as bodies that need to strive for perfection, I will create a specific type of classroom. If I imagine students don't need to be entertained, I will create a specific type of classroom. So I offer you Guillermo del Toro, the wonderful director's missives on the myths of love and perfection.
The two worst myths, I think, are romantic love and perfection. They're horrifying because they create standards that make everybody suffer. As a culture, we are in a spasm of perfection, where we demand things to either be the greatest or the worst, evil or good. We have turned into 5-year-olds.
I don't know about that bit, but anyway, maybe I'm still a 5-year-old. If I imagine students as bodies that engage in growth across a semester, I might design a writing classroom where students didn't have to be perfect. I might design a classroom where there's lots of like dendritic opportunities to go down an imperfect writing branch, get some feedback, and come back and edit and revise and go down a different branch. I might even design a classroom like it's a basketball court, metaphorically speaking. I love the way that Natalie Diaz talks about writing as physical. So she writes, even text is a physical space for me. It is not merely ink or font or symbols. Writing for me is no different than playing basketball. It's my body moving among and pushing up against and being moved by other bodies of language and the energy of language. So I try to create classrooms that are basketball courts for the energy of language. Which leads me to Just Housty's poem Anatomy, a poem about place in bodies, a poem that makes my body resonate every time I read it. So I am going to read it to you all right now. Anatomy. Open up your hands. Will I see lines on your palms like cracks in dry earth, or the imprint of curved talons, the remembrance of high perches and small warm-blooded animals? Open up your throat. You are subtle, my love, my lutescent warbler, but your song I would know even in the cacophony, this chorus of wide, wild, joyous passerines. Open up your belly. Will I see round, smooth seeds, or whip-like brittle stars, a puff of air and feathers, or just a hint of meadow grass? I think you do not know. I think we will all discover together what it is that nourishes you. Open up your chest. Will I find words buried behind your ribs like a midden, like a riverbank? Will I find words like stones, like gleaming shells in heavy earth? When we open up our students, what do we see? What do we want to see? What is the UBC anatomy of our students? Now, there are impediments to embodied teaching and learning in the classroom, and I will consider two impediments that I think are interrelated, and they are time and AI. Carolyn Roberts rightly points out that our education systems are controlled by the clock, and that there's always a sense of urgency in the classroom. Don't fall behind, we say to our students. Only 14 weeks and 34 classes to deliver the material to meet the learning outcomes. I need to get through 25 slides of content in 50 minutes. Or how about, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, tenure clocks? Carolyn Roberts is right. The linear concept of time often limits the ability for knowledge, learning, and growth to unfold in the space that is needed for deep understanding. Edward Casey argues that humans are problematically consumed by time. And he also suggests that an obsession with time is a resistance to place. How? Our limited time on Earth means we pull lots and lots and lots of Earth's resources close to us to make this time comfortable. Thus, unsustainable consumption of resources because of a fear of discomfort and death. Maybe we haven't forgotten maybe we have forgotten the value of place. He also notes there is no being without place. To be is to be in place. Because of time pressure, and because our students are overwhelmed by the many tasks we ask them to do every day, my theory is that AI slots in neatly as an antidote. AI is the experience bypass. AI is, oh, my body is too overworked and tired to figure this out and I need to get it done, bypass. AI is that, oh, I don't have enough time to deeply learn and experience the material, so I'll do it with AI, bypass. As a writing instructor, I think the experience of writing to be more important than the writing itself. Experiences, not things. Or as Robert Yagelski puts it, stop being obsessed with form. The truly transformative power of writing, he writes, is in the experience of writing rather than the text produced as a result of that experience. The text, no matter how important it might eventually become to the writer or the reader, ultimately is separate from the experience of writing it. Things don't transform us, experiences do. How might your students carry with them transformative, embodied experiences, not things? Do our students remember the things or the experiences? Another confession, I used to care too much about the form of my students' writing. Give them grades based on it. Give them a bad grade when their language was out of place like this language is. Life is short, lick the bowl. That sign does not belong in the bathroom, although it's really funny as it is in the bathroom. It belongs in a different space, which is to say, the kitchen, hopefully. Although that sign works for dogs, by the way. Yes, that's fine. We could do that, right? Now, instead of giving them grades for like messing up language, right? I just want them to chuckle like we chuckle at this sign. I just want them to show them bathroom language and discuss its lovely imperfections. So I got to give you 2 examples. So, okay, so this is a sign in a bathroom at the hospital at UBC. And it says, do not throw paper towels into the toilet. And I'm like, okay, I have absolutely no problem with that sign. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And this is a sign in F and H. Please do not put paper towels down the toilets. I asked you all to toss those pieces of paper at me. Understand the verb is problematic. When we have a phone, we put. This sign is asking us to put our hands geographically close, and the preposition makes it even worse, down. Like if you do an internet search for putting things down toilets, the images are shockingly rare because we're not that dumb. So do I know what this sign means? Yes. Is its imperfection really lovely? Yes. This is a better sign for what it's asking for in terms of the precision in the language. And this sign, I have to just a little bit. Okay. So 3 visions of teaching that I aspire to. So Dave Stuart argues that school, rather than something done to students, be a work of love crafted for them. Mandy Catron writes, what we're here to do isn't to assign grades, though unfortunately I can't get out of that one no matter how I try, but to learn new skills, try on ideas, and maybe on a good day, find reprieve from the millions of other responsibilities and obligations of human life. And then Lindsay Cuff calls on Leanne Simpson in her teaching, who says that the practice of telling stories is the practice of generating a diversity of meanings. It is a practice of deep relationality, not a looking at, but a looking with, or a looking through, or a thinking through together. If we want a new reality for our students, we write a different classroom story. So how do I want my students to be changed by my class? And what stories do I want my students to tell after they complete my class? This is an inexhaustive list, but I want them to tell the story of how I cared deeply and they were kind to themselves. I want my students to have experienced the love of learning in the classroom. I want my students to tell stories about learning as community and relationships. And I sincerely hope that my students consider the story of my classrooms as if they were home. A home that's cozy, safe to make mistakes and learn from them, bellies full, laughing and seeing with the stars. Thank you.
We have some time for questions.
Questions. So here we go. Yeah, I love it. Sorry, I'm getting water. I'm not running away. I could be running. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Do you have like these kind of activities? Do you like you do that kind of physical activity quite a bit? Is it like almost like every class kind of thing? I guess it depends on the class.
So I think that obviously our classrooms are very specific and they're also in their activity specific. So it's not every single class because one learns to learn how to write by writing. And writing is a pretty one of these kinds of things. But I try to incorporate a whole bunch of activities that ask them to move their bodies, that ask them to speak out loud, I do, so for example, in the first week, I asked them to do honey tastings and to turn those tastings into language. Right? And creative language. I don't know, I do other things, like lots of other things as well. Especially around midterm time when they're in the classroom doing this kind of stuff. Last week on Wednesday, too many people were sleeping and I said, okay, everybody's, and I asked them to switch sides. So I got this side to switch. I said, too many of you are sleeping, we need to wake up. And I said, I you know what, I wasn't mean about it, I know the room's hot. I know you're all tired, but let's move the bodies. So yeah, I try to incorporate as many of these things as I possibly can. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I think that's very much what I wanted to ask as well. You know, I have a similar history to you. My last appointment in Port Collins was
Yay, go Rams, yeah, okay.
was across English, anthropology, and environmental science.
Right.
And place and embodiment has been fundamental to my research forever. So in the classroom, when you talk about embodied experience, when you teach writing or storytelling, how do you encourage students how do you encourage embodiment in the actual process of writing?
In the actual process of writing,
Creative practice.
well, I don't know, here's another confession, I teach academic writing, and that doesn't make us feel much. Maybe sometimes it does. I guess what kind of academic writing it is.
Yeah.
I think that so in terms of, okay, so almost all writing is iterative, right? So I create classroom spaces where you write a draft and then you get feedback, you write another draft, you get feedback, you write another draft. But we're constantly also talking about our feelings in relationship to the stuff that we produce. Because sometimes we produce something and somebody says it's not good enough and we go, like, okay. So I'm constantly talking about the thing versus our experience of the thing. It can be difficult though, depending on what kind, like I don't have experiential learning classes, I guess, in the way that you could go out and my classes don't necessarily have labs, right? Having said that, I also get them to do writing exercises that force them onto campus. So one of the writing exercises I get them to do, which is just what I call a field notes journal entry, is I ask them to go and find a discarded thing and write the history of how it got there. Imagine the history of how, so I ask them to move their bodies to find the thing and then to write about the thing. So there's ways to do it, but my career, writing is it's a, you know, getting a tan from the computer screen kind of a thing. And also the other thing is that it's also hyper collaborative. So we do feedback exercises in class. So they're reacting to other drafts. And sometimes I say to them, when you're reacting to a draft, you've been here and you know how I've taught it. I say, trust your gut. So students call me over and say, I want to say this. And I say, trust your gut. Because usually the feedback that they give is like, so it doesn't feel right, or it doesn't sound in their heads right. So yeah, I guess that's the long answer to that question.
It's a great answer because I mean, I think one of the problems in the domain of science and speaking with scientists is that we tend to separate ideas of narrational storytelling from the sort of empirical contexts of generating evidence. But I mean, fundamental to those processes are exactly what you're talking about. Field journals, for instance.
Yeah.
I think that link, there's a great history of creative field journals underlying science. You know.
Or the naturalist drawing thing. Romuald Chimera talks about that in one of her essays about the idea of that scientists have an obligation to communicate things in a way that goes into our bodies rather than in one ear out and out the other. Which is not to suggest that scientific writing is not an amazing genre of writing. It's hyper specific, it joins, like there's lots of really lovely features of it. Yeah, 100%. Anyway, thank you.
In general, what is your grading? How are your courses looking in terms of grading?
Yeah, so I have about 40 or 50% of my classes labor-based grading. So do the work. and you get those credits. The research paper, sorry, they write a pseudo IMRAD, Introduction, Method, Results and Discussions, kind of a review kind of paper at the end of the term. And that paper's worth 40%. But by the time they're writing it at the end of the semester, they've had a lot of growth in their writing, right? Do I have review quizzes? Yes, but usually the scores on the review quizzes, I just want them to keep the class in their head because we do so much scaffolding, right? But my first two major assignments, the first one's a summary assignment and the second one is a knowledge construction assignment. Those two are feedback only, literally feedback. Now they can get a complete or an incomplete. And incompletes we reserve, my TAs and I reserve for assignments that, I don't know, that hand in physics to chemistry and say, but there's math in both. It's like, no, you got to follow the instructions. I got to see you trying out these skills. And complete and incomplete assignments receive the same amount of feedback, right? So I have a very feedback specific thing, right?
And when you grade writing, when you are evaluating the quality of writing, you have really specific rubrics for that, or you kind of read the thing and you...
Well, there's evaluation criteria, and I ask for really, really specific content in every single, so I teach to every single skill sets, assignments, and then teach to what's an abstract, what's an introduction, what are discussions paragraphs, stuff like that. So there's really, really specific structures or templates that they're using. And it's actually not hard to tell when somebody's received a C versus an A. So we talk an awful lot about that, like objective marking versus subjective marking, but at that time of the semester, it's like, oh, this is obviously an A, this is obviously a C for various reasons. But yes, each assignment also has an evaluation criteria, but I don't use rubrics. Yeah.
How do you teach feedback, not only to the students, but also for the TAs? So how do you make sure that feedback is kind of standard?
I have hour marking meetings for every single assignment with my TAs.
Yep.
I give them a document that says, here's what you should look for. There's a learning curve, obviously, and I also review everything. So by the end of the semester, the TAs are really, really familiar with the kinds of writing that I'm asking our students to produce. But my TAs also come to many of my classes, and they have all the PowerPoint slides and that, right? So that they're actually trained into the same system. And I also, as a confession, a lot of the times I use English graduate students because they're a little bit more obsessed with language. So they have a little bit more of a kind of a skill set for it. But I don't mind, obviously, Forestry TAs or LFS TAs, because I can train them into the system. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah. It's work. It's a lot of work because you can't, bubble sheet it. Or you can't yes or no, right or wrong it. Yeah. But my students, my TAs, and then I also sometimes adjust some of their strategies, right? So sometimes my T's want to be really kind and they'll write, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing ever, C+. And I'm like, oh, okay, hold on. That confuses students. Let's back off a little bit from that. So I have oversight for all of their feedback. But my T's are just, they know what they're doing. And also, it's also helpful that the first two assignments are ungraded. They don't have to give a grade. They just have to provide feedback. And they know what an effective summary sentence is with framing language and the parenthetical citation, all that kind of stuff, right? So they know what to look for. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Take a rosemary with you.
Already done.
Good luck finding that plaque. You can't see that. And then take it. Yeah, you take those. That plaque doesn't it? Literally, that plaque is no longer there. It tells us that the trees will inherit the earth. Right, it's a tree to memorialize. Anyway, thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Today.